Excuse me.
Good Thursday morning is the 26th of April 2018. We made it to Hump Day. Just 2 more days and it's the weekend. Hang in there. Yours truly will try my best to cheer you up. Welcome to another F-series of It's Just Another Ordinary Joe Show Thursday podcast. Looking forward to a bunch of exciting and stimulating conversation with you, our fellow Ordinary Joes and Ordinary Janes. Thursday, we talk about health, fitness, and what is this? Fashion? Fashion? Well, you know how I'm not so fashionable. What? Now let's take a step back and how did fashion get into the mix? I'm nowhere near any sense of fashion in me. Well, however, let us remind our viewers and our listeners and everybody in our community what is the core principle of the Ordinary Joe Show podcast. And that is we don't offer expert advice except for when we have a guest that come on who is an expert on a topic. But here in our community, we are fellow learners. We are fellow explorers. So we go together with our viewers and our listeners and we go along on an adventure together to explore and learn more about the subject matter.
Now if you feel good too, I want you to put your hands together and repeat after me. Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.
And true to our core principles here at Ordinary Joe Show podcasting station, we are a local, serving local community podcast here in Toronto, Ontario. Although we acknowledge that we also have an international impact and we also serve our international audience. Primarily, we are going to talk about local events and activities, but we make sure that those things that we cover also are beneficial to our international audience. I'm your Ordinary Joe host, Primero Ordinario Joe Salvador, and we start this podcast in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everyone, and this is a continuation of our conversation from last week, Thursday podcast. Fashion, fitness, and health. Well, let's put that in the right order. Fitness, health, and fashion. We were talking about how our persons, we are all composed of spirit, souls, and body. And so, being a fashionista, we need to first and foremost establish being a fitnessista, which is a word that I coined last week. That means fitness first, and then the fashionable appearance, the fashionable shape of your body will come after you are healed and you are fit from within. We were also talking about the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, which are the scientific and the mathematical formulas that the scientists and the mathematicians offer as a guideline to what we perceive as fashionable or beautiful. So those are the beauty ratios, the beauty formula, according to science and math. Last week, I took the side of the, if I can say, the less than absolute, which is the relative. I took the side of the relative and sort of offer you a thesis on the argument on the relative side. But today we'll take the absolute side. Thing is, I don't feel that neither side are being presented in the right light or properly. So the relative side, when they say that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, and so is ugliness, therefore is in the eyes of the beholder as well, and there's no such thing as a measuring stick for beauty, that is a partially truth, but not an absolute truth. And there's so many complexities that we need to unpack with that statement. Because truly, we cannot say something that is very hideous and force upon society what society naturally perceives as not a measure of beauty, but because of propaganda or social engineering, which is happening today anyways. A lot of movies are coming out trying to impose upon the normal, the natural, trying to impose upon us ordinary people, ordinary Janes, ordinary Joe, what for them they perceive to be what we need to accept as beautiful, but naturally, inwardly, it is being forced upon us what naturally be felt as hideous, but we cannot say so because we have to accept it as beautiful. But with the use of political correctness, we now, in the present 2018, in modern days, majority of society would police their own thoughts and especially police our own expression, our freedom of expression. We police ourselves because we don't want to be labeled as politically incorrect or hate mongers, or label our freedom of expression as hate speech. That's a fluid situation nowadays, hate speech, and who defines what that is? We know that Facebook is under fire under the United States Congress and Senate. And the biggest point of debate is their definition of what hate speech is. Because, so, for those who wants to police our freedom of expression and our freedom of thought, they will label anything as hate speech if they don't find it to be within their agenda. And all of a sudden, we cannot express our thoughts anymore. Because if we say that we reject hideous things, and this is a slippery slope, a lot of things that are not acceptable in the norm will all of a sudden be now labeled as relative, subjective, and not absolute perception, or it's not absolute fact, and therefore we cannot label them as such. So it starts with gender, we cannot say he or she. We cannot use those pronouns anymore. Some Canadian schools disallow the use of mother, father, and the Canadian national anthem had to be revised to fit into the political correctness heat map of the day. So, mankind is now a bigotry term. We have to say personkind or humankind. We cannot say mankind. Saying he or she is now a pronoun of bigotry. But we are all ordinary people. We are ordinary Janes. We are ordinary Joes. We don't get involved in those kind of political rhetorics or political manipulation or demagoguery. Forget all that. We'll just be as we are, the way we are normally and ordinarily been. We don't have to modify ourselves to fit other people's narrative. Thank you for sticking around, and here's a break time again.
Repeat after me.
Don't go away, we'll be back in 60 seconds.
1, 2, 3, 4. I got a good feeling. Oh, I got a good feeling.
Hello friends, thank you for tuning into our Thursdays podcast about fitness, health, and fashion. Thursdays. We are very pleased to tell you that we are going to start movie reviews on our Friday podcast, which is our F6 in the series: films, books, music, and art. Starting tomorrow, we got a few films in the lineup. Please don't miss it. 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. See you tomorrow at our film podcast. Take care. Now back to our regular programming. Welcome back, and thank you for sticking with us. It's really a pleasure to have you along and giving me company here with our conversation. Sounds like a monologue when I don't have any of you reacting on any of our social media platforms. So please don't be shy. I like to hear from you. Doesn't matter what part of the planet, what part of our world you are. You could be from Asia, Africa. You could be from Europe. I don't care. You don't speak straight English, or we can Google Translate. Put in your comments, and we will copy paste to Google Translate so that we can communicate that way. Don't be shy. Please do engage with us. Going back to our conversation about the absolute and the relative. And the reason we are talking about this is only within the context of perception of beauty. The reason we're talking about that is that because this is a podcast about fitness and health and fashion, which is pretty much another word for beauty. Well, last week I took the position that, we cannot impose on people what the influencers, those who are on the top 1%, who owns and manage and uses beauty contests as tools of propaganda, uses Hollywood, uses blockbuster films, multi-million-dollar budgeted films to impose on us what they have formulated as their formula for us of what is beautiful, what is attractive. So I heard this story. It's actually a preaching on the pulpit by one of the preachers that I know so well. He explained to us that he found out that back in the 70s, MTV and much music, MTV and their executives had sat down in a round table, a focus group round table, and discuss some of the styling that they want to see as a mainstream 20 years later. So back in the 70s, they sat down and on a drawing board they put on a black man with saggy pants, a backward hat, and a certain kind of language, tattoos, and appearance on that board back in the 70s by MTV executives. And they have declared on that round table, they said 20 years from now, this will be the mainstream appearance of young men walking down the street. And indeed, 20 years later, the hip-hop culture has become so mainstream that a lot of our young men walk around with saggy pants, almost showing their butts and their underwear. And according to this preacher, this was a social engineering effort by MTV and its executive to affect culture, and they were very successful with it. So then we see on television and many films and on our streets in early mid and even late 90s, we see this formulation by media company to affect society come through fruition, and it become the mainstream fashion among young men in the 90s, and it's still spilling over up to today. There's still a lot of young men who wear saggy pants showing their underwear. And this is what in marketing, when I took marketing, there is a concept called planned obsolescence for products that being rolled out. But on the opposite side as well, there is planned rollout of certain products and features of products that, even though it has been invented many years, they don't roll it out into one big rollout. I'll give you an example. When the personal computer first came out, there's so many revisions that it even though they have the latest revision, the latest version of the technology, they have to schedule out the rollout so that they can churn out the revenues from consumers. A very big example is like technology, right? Laptops, cell phones. Apple is a big proponent. Cameras, for example, Canon, they will always have a revision on their new rollout cameras, and then they will slightly change the dimension of the battery so that you will need to buy batteries, new ones, from them. And even though the old batteries are still functional or still usable, because it's not compatible with the new rolled out edition, then you're forced to buy another set of batteries. So it's all about business, and fashion is a big business. Fashion garments, very big business. They have to plan the obsolescence of styling, because if they don't plan it out, then people buy their styling, modernized styled fashion, and they could keep it for 5 years or 3 years. It'll be too long, and the fashion industry won't make money. They won't be able to churn money off consumers if their fashion doesn't go away, styling doesn't go away after planned expiry date. So technology, fashion, all that, you'll see there's a very, very quick turnaround. What's new? You buy something very new now, a new gadget, a new type of shoes, a new type of fashionable wear. 2 months, 3 months down the road, it's old school. It's old fashioned. You can't have that anymore. That's passé. That's old fashioned. The new has now arrived. Meanwhile, on their drawing board, on their in the boardroom of their directors, they already planned it out how many styles they'll be rolling out and what are the schedules. And meanwhile, we the consumers are all like just waiting for the new edition, the new iPhone, the new this and the new that, ready to spend more money. Churning is what we call it in the stock market. And it's illegal in the stock market, but it's very legal in the retail market. But most of our consumer, most of our ordinary Joes and ordinary Janes need to be awakened to this fact so that you don't fall victim to the churning of corporation who grabs all of your supposed to be savings for your future, but it's now all spent on your very modern and in current fashion, which will be obsolete a few months down the road. But it's okay. The corporations had already grabbed your savings and they're keeping it. And you don't get to keep any of those savings. You get to keep the old-fashioned wear. That's what it's all about. Our break time is here again. Don't go away. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
Now, if you feel good too, I want you to put your hands together.
Hello friends, thank you for tuning into our Thursdays podcast about fitness, health, and fashion. Thursdays. We are very pleased to tell you that we are going to start movie reviews on our Friday podcast, which is our F6 in the series, films, books, music, and art. Starting tomorrow, we got a few films in the lineup. Please don't miss it. 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. See you tomorrow at our film podcast. Take care. Now back to our regular programming. Welcome back. Thank you for giving me company here on our Thursday podcast on fashion, fitness, and health. There's so many things to talk about this subject that we tend to kind of branch off on so many possible branch, but let me do a very good job now and try to bring everything back into control and bring us back to what was originally intended branch that we should be tracking on, because there's so many, but we have so many Thursdays coming up, so don't worry about it. What we were talking about prior to our branching off on MTV Social Engineering was we were going to talk about the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio that we kind of mentioned back in the previous last week's episode. I took the position of the relative, and this is not a total turnaround. I still think that there is still some sort of relativity or subjectiveness on the definition of beauty in respect to that saying beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. But now we have a dilemma because the very same social engineers who were trying to impose their formula of beauty, their pattern, their cookie cutter of beauty to the ordinary Janes, the ordinary Joe, the same people are also using the opposite narrative, which is the subjective. They're also using that now to push another agenda, which is, now beauty is relative, and there's so many hideous and unacceptable and socially unacceptable concepts in the past that they're now pushing as, hey, it's relative. You don't say this is ugly, or you don't say this is bad, because the new bad is the new good. Orange is the new black. So they're redefining. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, it's very evil to call good evil and evil good. You don't do that, because that's an abomination. That's a twisting. So this brings us to the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, which also involves the phi, PHI, for circumference 3.14. The Fibonacci ratio is about 1.61, something like that. Anyways, those are the mathematics and the scientific formula that the social engineers are holding on to impose their will upon the ordinary folks. But this is what they got wrong, and this is how I want to clarify why I want to shed light on both positions, the absolutes and the relatives. The reason I was going for the relative in the last episode is because for the mega corporations and for the plastic surgeons who charges hundreds of thousands of dollars, or they're a billion-dollar industry, those cosmetic surgeons, they would impose on people that they're not beautiful enough because they don't fit into the Fibonacci or the golden ratio. But this is what there was there's so many thoughts going through my mind. Just gotta slow down so that I don't get ahead of myself. So that is the extreme, and the other extreme now is they're using the position of the subjective and the relative, but they have a different agenda. Now they want to push mediocrity, or the opposite even, hideous, ugly concepts, and make people accept it as beautiful and don't say anything about it not being beautiful, because now in the politically correct society that we live in, through speech and through fashion and through media and through films, we are now controlled in our expression. We are going to police our own speech, our own expression, because now you cannot say something to be ugly. You cannot describe something as it appears or as it is, because all of a sudden when you say somebody is obese even though they're obese, that's a hate speech to say the truth, right? Because for them, that's not the absolute truth. Now they're saying, if you're a bearded woman or you don't shave your armpits and that's the new beauty, you shave your head as a woman, they want to impose on us now that this is the new standards of beauty because that's a relative beauty for them. But for many men that I know, including myself, some of these are very unnatural. It's very unnatural to see. As an ordinary Joe, I have to stretch my imagination to appreciate some of this concept, even in fashion shows. New York Fashion Week, Toronto Fashion Week. Just check out. I don't go to any of those runways, those catwalk runways where they have the fashion shows, but I can check them out on YouTube. And some of the concepts of a wardrobe that they display on those runways, where the models walk down and show off. This is just hideous. Seriously, it's just ugly for my unsophisticated taste, for my ordinary Joe taste. I can't. I have to stretch the unnatural dimensions of imagination for me to accept them as attractive. But I have to accept it, or most people have to accept it, or else they're out of the circle, they're out of the loop. And it's a type of bullying, in my opinion. So that's the opposite take that they have on the relative. So in a way, I have to also take the position of the absolute when it comes to beauty. Because like in mathematics and in science, it's just the wrong... The corporation and the social engineers are implementing it the wrong way when they impose their formula for beauty so that everybody conforms to their formula. But using their own formula, it's really a testimony of truth against what their agenda is. If we take, for example, Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, this appears in nature, and this appears in many in the galaxies, in the universe. It appears even in music, and a lot of engineers are using that formula. They're using the Fibonacci sequence, and they take it to recreate something beautiful with it. Now, one of the best example of the Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio is a famous, recently recovered art piece that Leonardo da Vinci has created called the Salvator Mundi. And the scientists and the mathematicians and the connoisseurs of art have analyzed the photo of supposedly photo of Jesus Christ with his hands up and an orb on his left hand, maybe supposed to be demonstrating he got the whole world in his hands. But that particular painting is replete of many golden ratio, many Fibonacci sequence within the art piece. And this is the problem. This is a problem most expert misses, and I'm not claiming to be more intelligent than them, but I'd like to share this as an ordinary Joe thought that I think most ordinary Joes and Janes out there will probably see it a lot clearer than all these PhDs. And I think it's very simple. All these PhDs has been blinded from it, but when they see the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio in all the beauty of nature, in my opinion, that's the signature of God. And it is the manifestation as opposed to the factor. It's not the formula. It is the signature. So a lot of engineers, even engineers, admitted that they're not paid to do it right. They are paid to do it almost close to as right as possible, because mathematics has failed a lot of engineers, even space engineers. Astrophysicists are baffled by many projects that they have tried to carry out, and mathematics just seem to have failed them. But this is the problem. Mathematics is human, and this is my opinion. Mathematics is human creation. It's a concept for us to understand nature. And thank God that the Lord allowed us to have mathematics so that we can read into the evidences of nature, of God's creation. So when we see the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio and the pi in nature, that's because those are validations. Those are validations that those creations are indeed the handiwork of the Lord, the creation of God. And they are just pointing to the fact that God has His fingers on those beautiful creation. That's why they can then be verified as beautiful. So there's nothing subjective to that. But they're trying to take the manifestation, the revelation of the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, and they use it to recreate beauty, to recreate engineering, to recreate architecture, to recreate towers, to recreate space launch. But it's not working as much as they want, because what they're taking is the evidences. These are the breadcrumbs, the evidences, the cookie trails of Hansel and Gretel. But they take the cookie trails and use it as a formula, and that's where the cookie crumbles when they do it, reverse engineering of what God has already created as beautiful. Friends, there's so much more to talk about in this topic, but looks like half an hour is not enough time for us to really dissect everything. And it seems to me that we are coming to a close again on this Thursday podcast. I promise you, next week we are going to pick up where we left off, and please invite your friends, please invite your women friends to come and listen, because we might be digging up some ancient secrets, how to be that attractive person that you want to be, and also for your own mental evaluation, why you attracted to certain individuals. Because we talk about these things here on Thursday's podcast, because our Thursday's podcast is all about fitness, health, and fashion. And we'll do this again next week. So we'll see you again next week on Thursday for another episode of Health, Fitness, and Fashion Podcast. It's just another ordinary Joe show. We'll see you again next week. God bless you all.